Okay, can I welcome you to the Cabinet meeting of the 21st of September 2020. The first item on our agenda today is apologies for absence. I don't think we have any. Looking around, the next item is the minutes of the last minutes of the 7th of September. Can I ask whether everybody agrees them as a true record or not?
Yeah, I move, move, whatever I'm doing, moving.
And I'll second, Leader.
Thank you very much. Okay. Next item is to receive declarations of interest, if any.
No.
I think there are none. Okay. In that case, we will go to the business of the meeting. But before I do, I will refer to the last minutes where we talked about the COVID-19 situation and where we asked people to be vigilant and to stay safe and to avoid contact or passing on the infection. Clearly, things have escalated since then. We know that we had a lockdown in Caerphilly, followed by a lockdown in RCT, and it's just been announced that there'll be lockdowns in Newport, Blaenau Gwent, Merthyr and Bridgend. So it does mean that everyone around us in the areas, this is something which people need to realise is serious, and that COVID-19 has not gone away. And that's clearly shown by the peak that has risen in some of those areas. Thankfully, at the moment, our area is not peaking too much, although it is rising. So can I please send out a further plea to everybody in available Morgan and elsewhere for that matter, that they should stay vigilant, they should wash their hands, and if they can't wash their hands, use hand sanitizers. But obviously stay within their close bubble if they possibly can, and if they're going out to be safe, keep 2 meters apart and make sure that not only if they have the coronavirus, they don't pass it on, but more particularly they can't pick it up off anybody else. I'll say no more, but it is a serious matter which we cannot ignore any longer. Otherwise, we will be in another spike very, very soon, and hopefully we can contain it by the lockdowns around us. Okay, sorry to start that way, but I think we have to. The next item on the agenda is the annual Treasury Management Report. The purpose of the report before you is to outline the Council's Treasury Management options for the period 1st of April 2019 to the 31st of March 2020. The report outlines the changing economic conditions in both the UK and other world economies during the last financial year, as these did have an impact on Treasury management operations that were carried out during the year. The Council's primary objective for the management of its investments are to give priority to the security and liquidity of its funds before seeking the best rate of returns. In other words, we won't just go for the most amount of money, we will go to the safe option. These investments attract a slightly more favourable rate of return than investing in the UK, because one of the things that we do is we actually place a lot of our majority of our funds investing in other local authorities. Slightly more favourable returns than investing in the UK government, but still gives priority for the security of funds invested. For the first time through in 2019-2020, the Council made use of the UK bills as an alternative to investment with other local authorities, something that was new, but we tried it out. This provides some more flexibility with regards to how monies are invested. When managing the Council's debt, the primary aim is to ensure long-term affordability. So the Council last year continued to finance a significant proportion of capital expenditure from internal resources. As a result, the Council's external borrowing was well within the authorised limit of operational boundaries set in 2019-20, and therefore limited the debt charges that were paid during the year. By charging it by taking money from ourselves, we saved a lot of money. Insofar as the Treasury management operations are entered into in 2019-20 are concerned, all Treasury management activity undertaken during the financial year complied with the amended approved strategy, the CIPFA Code of Practice and relevant legislation. What this report actually does now is ask the Cabinet to accept the annual report on Treasury management and that this report be referred to full council on the 21st of September 2020 for approval. That is at 6 o'clock this evening. In order to do that, we also have to use the Article 14.14.2.2 of the Council's Constitution urgent decision procedure to be authorised in respect of recommendation 1 above. I don't know if anybody wants to go into any detail, but we will be discussing it, or possibly discussing it tonight, if we agree this today at full council tonight. But I assure you that everything that's been done complies with all the rules. So, can I will formally move those recommendations. Can
I'll formally second, Leader.
Thank you very much. That goes for tonight. So the next item on the agenda is the Vale Glamorgan Annual Report Improvement Plan Part 2. The purpose of the report is to present the draft Vale Glamorgan Annual Report, the Improvement Plan Part 2, as it used to be called, 2019-20. The report also incorporates an end-of-year position statement on our corporate risk, an annual review and progress against our regulatory proposals, and the head of internal audit's opinion on the council. Due to the time scale and the timetable set by legislation and the revised schedule of the council meetings due to COVID-19 pandemic, it has not been possible for scrutiny committees to review the annual report prior to it being presented to the Cabinet. It's unfortunate, but we are where we are. It's proposed, therefore, that the plan, if agreed here, is referred directly to full council tonight, again on the 21st of September, for their consideration. I would say, though, that the majority of the information contained in the report has previously been reported to all scrutiny committees in the Cabinet as part of the quarterly performance reporting. Consultation has been undertaken with the strategic leadership teams and relevant sponsoring directors for the respective areas. I don't intend to go into any great detail with this, but there are some issues in terms of this. The report presents the Vale Glamorgan Annual Report Improvement Plan, which outlines our progress towards achieving the Council's wellbeing improvement objectives. Certain aspects of the performance have been available to enable us to complete our performance. Some haven't been, sorry. Our statutory obligations were suspended due to the COVID-19, and when this data becomes available, it will be reported to members as appropriate as part of our quarterly performance. On balance, considering the significant progress has been made in achieving our vision and given the overall performance, our RAG status is in fact green. There are some issues in the Insight Board. I've incorporated all our regulatory proposals for the improvement, as well as an area for further development to be identified by the Council, and they can be found on pages 93 to 97. I don't intend to go into any more detail than that, to be honest, but the point that I would raise is that although it hasn't been the scrutiny committees, most of this has already been to them before, and indeed to this committee. So the purpose of the report is to accept it today and then pass it on to Council tonight. And I'm going to formally move that.
And formally second.
So I'm formally going to move that the Cabinet consider and endorse the draft Vale Glamorgan Annual Report and refers it to the plan to full council on the 21st of September. In order to do that, the use of the Article 14.14.2.2 of the Council's Constitution, which is the urgent decision procedure, be authorised in respect to recommendation 1 above, and that following consideration by us and the members of full council, that the annual report is referred to the Audit Committee for final oversight of the Council's performance for 2019-20, including progress against its regulatory recommendations proposals for improvement, which are contained in Appendix A. And as I said, there's an insight tracker on page 93 to 97. Sorry, I needed to formally move those because there were 14.14.2, so I formally move those recommendations.
And formally second.
Thank you. Is that agreed? Good. Thank you again for tonight. Next item on the agenda is the coronavirus recovery strategy. There is a presentation. I'm not sure if somebody might be giving this. I think it might be Tom. This report provides Cabinet with the Council's coronavirus recovery strategy, which is appended at Appendix A. is structured around the three phases of response, transition and recovery. And reflecting on the learning from the responses, that has identified a series of recovery themes. A number of the strategic recovery priorities have been identified. These priorities provide the strategic direction for the service to develop recovery plans and will inform the Council's annual delivery plan for 21-22. The report provides a commentary on the structure and content of the coronavirus recovery strategy and seeks endorsement of the strategy and approach to developing and delivering it. The report recommends also that all scrutiny committees will be made aware of it, but I am aware that some scrutiny committees have already received some reports, and the two that are left will be receiving reports this week. So basically what I'm going to ask is that the recommendation that the Cabinet note the contents of this report, which is at Appendix A, which is the recovery strategy. It is recommended that we endorse the recovery strategy, which is Appendix A, and the proposals contained in this report relating to its delivery. It's also recommended the Cabinet notes that this report and the coronavirus recovery strategy, Appendix A, has been reported to some scrutiny committees and will be to the two remaining scrutiny committees this week. And it's been sent there for scrutiny committees for their consideration in identifying any particular areas of focus for the committee's forward work programme, and I know that some of them have considered that already. It's also recommended that this report and the coronavirus recovery strategy be shared with the members of the Vale Glamorgan Public Service Board and all town and community councils. It's also recommended that the Cabinet receives further updates on the progress made against the priorities contained in the recovery strategy in due course. Now, the report does go into some detail, but as I said, I wanted to just move the recommendations first, but there is a Appendix A, and I think that might be considered or looked at by Tom or not. I'm not sure, but it is before you for consideration.
I'm happy to run you through the presentation if that would be useful, Leader.
If you could possibly just do it very, very quickly, but thoroughly as you always do. Please.
No problem at all. I should just bring this up for you now. As you were saying, Leader, the strategy that's in front of you, the Cabinet report you've just been through, gives the kind of architecture. So as usual, you'd expect to see the introduction, and this is the strategic context within which the strategy is operating. So you can see that at the moment we're working on both response and transition, but the recovery work is that slightly medium to long-term focus, so setting out the direction. The scrutiny committees have had an update this month in terms of our response and transition, so I won't go through this in detail, but this sets out what our objectives were on in terms of the response phase, and as was set out in the report to your Cabinet on the 23rd of March, the governance and decision-making arrangements during the pandemic. There's a section within the strategy about reflective learning that's been undertaken with all senior managers across the organisation, which has helped inform the recovery strategy, and that's set out in these slides contained in your pack here. We also ran a wellbeing survey with all members of staff during the summer months, focusing in on a range of different areas, and the strategy sets out the results of that survey that attracted just over 1,100 responses, and the strategy has detail around the various questions that were asked. We're now in the stage of transitioning where we are both managing response but also giving thought to recovery, so needing to make sure that there are suitable mechanisms in place to do that, and the section on transition sets out how that's being managed on behalf of Cabinet in the strategy document here, and you can see where the objectives are slightly different now in terms of managing the situation that we find ourselves in and the arrangements that we've got in place to do that. And then the document goes on to set out the actual recovery strategy, recognising that this is not going back to where we were before March, and that there are significant opportunities to fundamentally rethink the way the council works. It's structured, as you said, around these 6 recovery themes here, which we've aligned with the council's new wellbeing objectives, which are set out on this particular slide in terms of the 4 areas of focus within the new corporate plan. And you can see that the recovery themes align very neatly with the three of them, and then working with and for our communities is about enabling those things to happen. Part of the recommendations is that Cabinet endorse the approach to managing recovery, which is that we'll manage this in parallel with our performance reporting arrangements for the remainder of this year, and then they will be delivered through the Directorate Action Plans. We've undertaken a significant amount of assessment work, which are linked from these two slides in terms of a community impact assessment, looking at particular impacts on areas of our community through the lens of the different protected characteristics. We've also undertaken an economic impact analysis, which sets out issues such as universal credit claimants, the unemployment rate, and some of the financial impacts on business and our residents that we've seen so far. And these two pieces of assessment work will be regularly updated and available to all members for their information. On behalf then of Cabinet, the strategic leadership team looked at a series of threats and opportunities associated with each of our wellbeing objectives, and that's led us to identify a series of strategic recovery priorities, and they're set out for each of the wellbeing objectives in the strategy. So you can see 1 to 5 there, for example, and this then sets out those recovery priorities going forward. In terms of us now taking this forward, we'll report this strategy following your consideration to all scrutiny committees in October, and then there'll be a series of engagement and consultation exercises on the delivery of the strategy through the Directorate plans for the remainder of the year.
Okay, that's fine, thank you. I think what's important is that we've also talked to the staff so we are well aware of the feelings within the staff within the authority. But clearly, it's a strategy we have to be mindful of. But there's also we have to be mindful of the fact that we could go back 1 step, so it could be 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I'm afraid at this stage. Any comments from anybody else, please? I did move the recommendations, but if anybody's got any comments in relation to the strategy itself, I'd welcome any comments. And thank you, Tom, for that presentation. No, Liz. Yeah.
Thanks, Leader. I was just only to say I was present at Learning and Culture Scrutiny last week, where this was discussed, okay. And obviously a lot of education outcomes were included in it at that time, which were very impressive in terms of what was delivered during the initial stages, and now how they're rebuilding going forward. So just adding my thanks to those teams for their monumental efforts during the lockdown, but also the work they've done since to get schools open and to get a degree of normality while we're still trying to avoid future spikes. So I'm happy to second the report.
Good, thank you. Any other comments? Ben, I think you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Similar to our Deputy Leader, I attended the Health Living Social Care Scrutiny Committee last week, where there was a particular focus, of course, on what social services have been able to do in response. And I think reflecting on what you said earlier with regard to how cases are rising, the fact that this strategy includes the ability to return to a response phase, recognising what we've put in place and how we've operated in order to most effectively manage issues which arise, spikes and so forth. And actually the situation with testing is significantly better than it was at the very early stages when we look back to March. But certainly at the Scrutiny Committee, similar to education, there was a lot of focus on what happened within social care, and I certainly want to put on the record my extreme thanks to everyone for everything they've done to add to our response and working above and beyond, and people volunteering from other parts of the council to come across to support PP amongst other things. And I note that the corporate side of this, the overall strategy, will have a more thorough airing in the next round of scrutiny meetings in October. And I think all the members present were very keen to focus in on a particular scrutiny area. So I think we focused a lot on the social care elements, and I'm sure we see that wider picture. But by October, we may well be in a very different situation with regard to local lockdowns or regional considerations for how we're controlling this. So I'm certainly happy to support what we're putting forward today.
Okay, thank you. Any other comment? No.
Can I just come in, Leader, very, very briefly? I think that's that's quite an important point, because what this report does more than anything is looks forward to the next stage in this sort of journey that we've been on.
Yeah.
We've spent a lot of time in response mode, and we've had a lot of challenges as we have responded to COVID-19. What's vital now is we look forward to see how we can put some of these recovery actions in play and in train, whilst unfortunately still having to deal with many of those issues that we were dealing with back in the summer, because the response phase hasn't gone away. It's still with us, but it nevertheless is important that the next round of scrutiny committees do have a chance to look at how we plan to move forward into that recovery phase and have an input into that phase. So this is a useful report to set that on its way, so to speak.
Indeed, yes, that's true. And I hope that we'll be able to continue to have the recovery phase at this stage, and go out of the coronavirus situation pandemic altogether. But time will tell. Okay, thank you for that. So is that agreed that the recommendations have been put before you? Yeah. Yes. Thank you very much. Okay, in that case, I'll go to the next item, which is in relation to the Kimmin in Penarth. This report is to seek approval to declare the Kimmin surplus to the council's requirements and to market a house and a proportion of the gardens as outlined in this report. The report actually provides an update regarding the Kimmin, which has previously been let to Penarth Town Council and which was reverted to this council's control in April 2020. The report also sets out the proposals to declare the Kimmin, which is the building, surplus to the requirements of this council. It's normal procedure that if we have a building which we think could use somewhere else, then we will go through each area to find out if anybody can use it. If it's not proposed to use it, then we always do what we're actually considering doing. So to consider the future options for the retention and the remainder of the grounds, we've also looked at that too. So we've also looked to retain the grounds for public use, and I think that's important because there's a lot of things being said on social media, etc., which aren't actually correct. A further report will be provided in due course to present the Cabinet the outcome of the advertisement process in order to inform any decision in relation to the disposal of the Kimmins and a small part of the grounds around it. You wouldn't expect the house to be taken without at least a proportion of the area around it contained within that. At that time, a decision will also need to be taken as to whether the council should proceed to advertise the loss of public open space that would be required by the legislation, and a loss of public space would be that part of the area which would be encompassed within the curtilage of the Kimmin itself. Basically, I think there's been a lot of rumour flying around as to what we intend to do. But this simply authorises us to advertise the Kimmin on a long lease basis, contained in the report in Appendix A, and at the basis for marketing planning the brief. A further report will come, as I said, without prejudice in recommendation 5, which is the public open space. So we're talking about marketing the house and small gardens for specific use, and also something we're minded of, that it needs to be a use which would be of use to the people of Penarth. The delegated authority is also given to consider the short, medium and long-term options for the retention of the remainder of the site as a public gardens. I echo that part, as public gardens, and I think that's important to realise, and that is also contained in Appendix B. As I said, this is a detached Victorian house in mature landscape gardens of approximately 2 hectares. The building isn't listed, but it is a county treasure, and we're reminded for that. So the presumption, therefore, and I'll say this because it's important that people realise it, that the presumption, therefore, will be that the building is retained for the benefit of the local area and wider community. Prior to it coming back from Penarth, they did look at the house and gardens. However, they did serve a notice to terminate the agreement during 2019. The agreement was terminated on the 31st of March. But I also emphasise that between serving the notice and the asset returned to the council, there was continued dialogue with the town council. Since the return to the council control, maintenance for the land has also been responsible with the local authority. So basically, we are at a place where we've had the building back, we've had the land back, and we need to take options for the future property. It is the council's standard procedure that when considering alternative uses, then this is in line with the way we normally do things to look at whether or not we need to dispose of it, and there is a disposal protocol. And consideration is also given to whether or not there is a longer, if there's no longer a requirement for the council. As I said, we established there was no internal purpose for the come-in, and therefore we concluded that it was surplus and therefore it should go out, and we should look for positive use of the building for the benefit of the town. Officers have made inquiries, by the way, with the National Trust and the Landmark Trust to ascertain their interest in the come-in, but neither of which have come forward, and neither of them are indeed interested. For this reason, that's why we're considering the marketing the house and ground as shown in Appendix A. But I have to say that the marketing brief, which will accompany it, it is proposed that those uses will be limited to community, hotel and restaurant type use. It's important that you realise that it's not going to go for other uses. And it's also important to note that the remainder of the grounds, which is at Appendix B, would not be included in the proposal. If this is agreed, then once it's marketed, the conclusion of the marketing will come and be the subject of a further report. And if possible, we would look to see if we can enable a preferred bidder to be identified. An element of the public open space may be disposed of, as I said, because if you have the house and some land around it, there is a possibility, a potential for loss of some public open space. If that is the case, then we have to make sure that we meet the requirements of Section 123 of the Local Government Act. But what we also have to do is to place notices in papers. It is stated within the report, but it also means that if it's loss of public space, there is a procedure to go through. If we consider that, then objections can come from the public, and we would have to consider those before we made a final decision. In terms of the land, it does also say, because it gives an open hand to anybody else, the council doesn't actually have to directly manage the land, which is in Appendix B, but I suspect that we will do. Therefore, we will be considering options for the future management of the grounds at Appendix B. So I know that there was some discussion with Penarth Town Council that they wanted to retain the gardens, and that is still open. As I said, Penarth Town Council recently indicated the interest in taking on a longer term commitment of the grounds, and if that's the case, then fine, that can be discussed at a further stage. But this report refers really to the potential marketing of the house and small part of the grounds. We have had some information or some comments from local members, and indeed from the leader of Penarth Town Council. They will be tabled and they will be minuted in the minutes. I will just slightly consider some of the issues that have been said from the leader of the Town Council. They said they're disappointed that the Vale and Town Council were unable to come to an agreement about the use of the property, and indeed so am I. because if we could have done, I think that would have been good, but it had to be done before the lease was surrendered. It does leave the door open for future discussions if they want to come as part of this offer that on marketing exercise. They were also felt surprised we would offer a 25-year lease on to another outside organisation when that wasn't offered to the town. And in fact, this gives an offer to the town council too, so it doesn't preclude it. I think they're also commenting about they'd rather have the property for the benefit of Penarth residents rather than a commercial entity. But as I said, there is a strict proviso in what we are marketing this issue for, and clearly it would be one where we would expect the town to have some input and to be able to use it. But again, we're talking about the land, the ground itself, which we will be keeping for public use. It also talks about the fact it's a key site in Penarth, and they would like the community of Penarth to be reassured that the right of way currently enjoyed by the residents and access to the parts of the ground outside the boundary will be retained. As I said, if the area part B is in public use, then that will continue. We've also had correspondence from Councillor Ruba Sibignanam, who is a local member. She felt that they didn't have enough information or time to consider it, but clearly this is the normal procedure. We would have a report, we would send it to the local members, and they can make comments on the report, which she has. She wants to gauge the view of residents, so they were asking for more time, but as I said, basically this is a marketing exercise. There's an option for everybody to come forward and make any views known and show that there are interested parties by third parties. She accepts the fact that the building requires a great deal of work, but it's an asset for the use of the people of Penarth. And again, we're asking that we work together, and I see no problem with that. We've also had one from Councillor Neil Thomas, another member. He's also made a point that they weren't included until a late stage, but as I said, that is the normal procedure. His preferred option would have been for the Penarth Town Council to have retained it, but that is long gone because they handed up the lease. He makes the point that he hoped the building and grounds can be kept as a public access building for the benefit of the town, and he makes the point that originally, because of local government reorganisation, it may have been in the hands previously of Penarth Urban District Council, which is probably the case.
I think the leader's Wi-Fi has frozen. If I can take advice from the monitoring officer, whether I should continue that or whether we have a temporary adjournment until he's back online.
Either would be appropriate. Obviously, I think the leader might have unfrozen.
Right.
Sorry, I don't know how far you got with that, but basically I was talking about Neil Thomas.
I think you'd finished, Neil. You were just done on recommendations, yeah?
That's okay. The only point that I think I didn't make was that he makes that if the property is to be leased separately as suggested, then more detailed information is now required to delineate where the divisions will be, and clearly that will be part of the report that comes forward. As far as I can see, this is normal procedure in terms of a building which we have no requirement with. We will put it out to market and see what comes from it. There has already been some interest from different parties, and if we agree this, then we can put it out and see what comes back. Clearly, there will be more discussion, so this isn't the end of the matter by any means. I got some hands up, and I apologise for losing my signal. Something wrong with my Wi-Fi today. Liz, you got your hand up, I think.
Yes, leader, but I think Catherine had her hand up first.
Right. Okay, Catherine. In that case, because I can't see Catherine at the moment.
I'm here. Hello.
Okay.
Thank
I
you,
can see you.
Deputy Leader. Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the fact that obviously I've lived in Penarth for most of my adult life, and I know how well loved the Kimmin is by so many residents here. It's unfortunate that we find ourselves in this position, and I think some people have totally misunderstood the language and the terminology that the council use a lot. Lydia, you explained it quite well, but when you say the word disposal, it suggests that we have no care or concern for it, and that's not what it means. It's just the way that the council uses terminology. It just means that we don't have a use for it within the local authority as such. And moving forward, it's just going to be so interesting to see what does come forward, because we all would love for it to stay within the community use, and we all want to see the building thrive and the grounds thrive in the future. So I'm really keen to see what happens with when we do our marketing. And in the way that South Lodge is going to be rejuvenated very shortly in exactly the same process as the Kimmin is, then I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes forward. So thank you for listening.
Okay, I'll bring Ben. I think Ben was next, actually, looking at Dan's one.
Thank you, Leader. Echoing the points Councillor McCaffer made, clearly, if I'm a resident who hears the language disposal and doesn't have the ability necessarily to immediately access the very detailed report that's been written, I imagine I would feel similar panic about a loved local asset. But, you know, as another local member in Penarth, I absolutely want the best thing possible for this building, and I particularly want to highlight, you know, in this report, you know, we're stating public access to the grounds, and the maps show the areas that may be apportioned off as part of it would be maintained. And the key thing in 2.7 of the report, you know, this will be limited to community, hotel, restaurant type uses. The community angle encompasses a lot of the fantastic ideas I've heard people proposing in the comment section about, well, why doesn't that get used for the building? Why doesn't that get used for the building? And the fact that we're using language like disposal allows these things to happen. You know, this is a local authority owned building. It doesn't preclude, as the leader pointed out, it doesn't preclude the town council from putting in a bid for the long-term lease. And it doesn't preclude any community group from making that interest known. We are incredibly keen, and I don't want to prejudge anything that might come in, incredibly keen to see the building retained, and even that future community commercial use should, you know, maintain the feeling of those mature gardens as is being stated. I am disappointed that there are certain local town councillors who are unable to read a report prior to making comments and have stirred up a panic in people who share our passion for the building. And I would urge anyone who's watching this recording, and hopefully I am quoted accurately, to read the full contents of this 10-page document that has been constructed with great care, having had a lot of consideration for the future of the building. We have taken the time to engage with stronger national third sector organisations, National Trust, Landmark Trust, to see about their interest. We have taken the time to consider, bearing in mind, you know, the town council have essentially mothballed and shut up shop in April 2019. We were in a position to take over, with COVID obviously getting slightly in the way, June, July time, and in that short period of time, the amount of work that's gone on, this is the natural first step, and that's a very true thing. This is the first step of what we are going to do to try and secure the long-term future of a community asset in this place. And so I'm very excited about what this gives us the opportunity to do. Clearly, there'll be follow-up reports. Clearly, we're going to probably have a conversation about this within a scrutiny context within the council, and I look forward to that conversation in the public domain. But if we can get the points across that in whatever way forwards, you know, we are looking to maintain public access and routes through the ground. I know a lot of people in upper, you know, parts of Penarth nearer to St Augustine's Church use that route down. That's maintained in all the different plans we have. And I think that now that the Vale Council are looking after the grounds in the short term, you'll see a lot of improvements from what was essentially a mothballed site for the last year by Penarth Town Council. And so I don't know if we've had the formal seconding. I'm happy to formally second if you're moving those recommendations, Leader. And I think this is a great first step for making a long-term future for the Kimmin viable. And I look forward to what comes in.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Liz, and then Peter. Liz, you're on mute.
Thought I'd clicked it. There we are. I think a lot of what I wanted to cover has actually been covered by Ben. But we need to reiterate that this building hasn't been used now for over a year, and I think we're all keen that this comes back into productive use as soon as humanly possible. Similarly, being Cabinet Member for Education, sometimes the legal language we have to use gets in the way of understanding. And the words, as Catherine mentioned, disposal and marketing. Marketing seems to imply that we're just going for the biggest amount of money possible. But no, we're actually going for the best public use in a sustainable manner. And what I also need to make very plain is if we don't get something that's appropriate through this marketing, it won't happen. We've done that before, and
Yes.
there are iconic buildings in the Vale that are now hugely successful. One I can quote is the Pump House in Barry. If I'm not mistaken, that took 3 goes.
It did.
We started with a plan of our own, which we couldn't find the funding for, and then we went out to market twice, and look at the success of that now. So if we don't find an appropriate use, we won't. But the number of people that have been in touch since this was publicised has actually been really encouraging. So I look forward very much to seeing the quality bids that I expect will come in for this building.
That's a fair point, actually, because it is right that this procedure isn't out of the ordinary. It's the way that buildings are usually disposed of, if that's the right word. But the thing to have to remember is that these have been disposed of by a long lease, and I think that's important that people have missed out too. It isn't actually being sold off per se. Peter, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, I think my colleagues have hit the point about local government speak, and the term disposal isn't quite as daunting and terrifying as some people have picked up in the media. It is a process, so I'll not repeat that. What I will say is, as someone who has hired privately the rooms at the Kimmin for family use, and been involved with community use for, I would think, 15 years on and off, and meeting regularly there, my comments about the building is, as it is, it's not terribly fit for purpose. The toilets are upstairs. There is a nice wide entrance, and if you're in a wheelchair, that's okay. But the toilet facilities, if you are mobility impaired, are not that great, and the rooms are incredibly small. And there's a very rudimentary kitchen, which is up another step and around a difficult corner. So one of my hopes is that however the building is utilised, it becomes more fit for a community service, and I think that's what we're all striving for. So I'm distressed that the way it's been reported poorly, and now this document is in the public domain. I would certainly encourage people to actually read what is actually being said.
Thank you, Peter. I concur. I think people need to start reading things because most people don't. However, won't go any further with Margaret. You're on mute, Margaret.
I'm not a Penarth member, but I would like to say it's disappointing when people start rumours and then people start panicking and they don't understand exactly what's going on. But we need to get them to read reports and read exactly what it says and not take little bits and then turn it round to upset people. I can't wait to see this happen, and I wish you all well in Penarth, and I hope it goes to what is the most appropriate situation for the Penarth people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that then. In that case, it's been moved and seconded. I think we all agree?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much. The next item is any items of urgency that I do have. In fact, I do have one. In fact, it's the excuse me, I'm going to read on my screen. It's town centre recovery measures, and this will be taken by the Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Education and Regeneration. Liz.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I think an awful lot of people have heard discussion about the measures that are taken to support our town centres in these difficult times, and a lot of people have been interested in the work we've been doing to commission some urban design consultants to come up with ideas to support our town centres. This, in effect, is the report that is required to enable that to happen. Back in 2019, their funding was awarded to local authorities within the Cardiff capital region. It was called the Targeted Regeneration Investment Thematic Grants Programme. It's quite a mouthful. And that was to do with economic development within our local authorities. And now that with the issues related to COVID-19, it has been decided that some of that funding can be, it's about £3.5 million between the local authorities in the Cardiff capital region, can be repurposed to provide a greater degree of flexibility in adapting to changes needed in our town centres because of the coronavirus pandemic. So our amount comes to around about 500,000 out of that 3.5 million. The council will prioritise its share of the investment in the following town and district centre shopping areas, which is the 5 main ones in the Vale. That's High Street, Broad Street in Barry, Halton Road in Barry, Cowbridge Town Centre, Llantwit Major Town Centre, and Penarth Town Centre. Sorry, I'm just losing my notes. In August this year, urban design consultants were commissioned by the council to prepare an audit report and undertake concept design work for those shopping areas. And the objectives of the project are to facilitate trade and economic recovery. So this is primarily a project to do with economic outcomes in our town centres. Enable and encourage the public to visit our town centres safely and with confidence, because that's something that a lot of people have fed back to us. Enhance the aesthetics of the area and make a lasting positive impact. Now, because it was funding that was originally agreed for one purpose and now we're allowed to repurpose that funding, there are a lot of different legal and organisation steps that we need to do, and that's why we have a whole page of recommendations 1 to 8, and what they are seeking to do. I won't read them all out because we'd be here all day, but it's to allow the council to agree any variations to the terms of the original service level agreement, prepare, complete and execute required legal documentation to vary that, to approve the use of the repurpose funds for COVID-19 recovery measures in our town centres, to enable the targeted regeneration investment capital allocation for this financial year to be managed effectively, and to allow project preparation work to either continue or commence, and in doing so contribute to the delivery of the COVID-19 recovery measures in our town centres, to prepare, complete and execute all the legal documentation with the urban designers where required, to allow project preparation work to either continue or commence, and that's to move that ahead, to prepare, complete and execute the required legal documentation with third-party suppliers or providers. Again, that's to do with the urban designers and potentially work that is then commissioned through that. And probably more importantly, recommendation 8 is about the use of Article 14.2 of the Council's Constitution, the urgent decision procedure. And that's actually because we need to get moving on this work. We will be consulting with local businesses, local town councils, etc. on the proposed work as it goes forward. But we need to get this working. It's worth mentioning, if people are interested, the timescales of the project are laid out in paragraph 2.5, and we want all of this work decided, consulted on and implemented by the end of this financial year. So it's actually going to be quite a challenge, and we need to get a move on. So in that, I move those recommendations, Leader.
Okay, thank you. Peter, you got your hand up. I don't know if that's legacy. Peter? All right, okay, it's gone down. Okay, no, that's fine. I think it's important that we, you know, if we can repurpose this money, then we ought to do it, and the sooner the better. So 1414 it is. I have no problem with that. I'll formally second the proposals. Any comments from anyone else?
No.
No. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Good, thank you. I have nothing else under part 1, and I have nothing under part 2 either. So can I thank you for your forbearance, especially bearing in mind for some reason my system just today, and I don't know why, because it's been solid for days and days and days. But there you go, that's life. So thank you for that. Thank you for your attendance, and we'll see you at council tonight.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Leader.
Cheers.
Bye.